Okay, we're good to go.
We live?
Yes.
Good evening. Today is Wednesday, June 28th, 2023 at 6:30 p.m. We are in the Brecksville Broadview Heights Education Center, 6638 Mill Road, Brecksville, Ohio. This is a meeting of the Board of Education in public for the purpose of conducting the school district's business and is not to be considered a public community meeting. There is time for public participation during the meeting as an indicated agenda item. Prior to the regular meeting, the board will meet in executive session for the consideration of the purchase of property for public purposes or sale or other disposition of unneeded, obsolete, unfit for use property at competitive bidding. If premature disclosure of information would give an unfair, competitive, or bargaining advantage to a person whose personal private interest is adverse to the general public interest, item C per board policy 0166 executive session. This meeting will be live streamed via YouTube and will also be recorded for later viewing. Please consider subscribing to our YouTube channel. Item 1B, please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Item 1C, roll call.
Mrs. Kramer?
Yes.
Mrs. Kwiatkowski? Mrs. Mack? Mrs. Wigman?
Yes.
Mr. Dosen?
Yes. Item 2A, resolve to enter into executive session for the consideration of the purchase of property for public purpose or sale or other disposition of unneeded, obsolete, unfit for use property at competitive bidding if premature disclosure of information would give an unfair, competitive, or bargaining advantage to a person whose personal private interest is adverse to the general public interest per Ohio Revised Code 121.22 item A. May I have a motion?
So moved. Second.
Roll call.
Mrs. Kramer?
Yes.
Mrs. Kwiatkowski?
Yes.
Mrs. Mack? Mrs. Wigman?
Yes.
Mr. Dosen?
Yes, we'll be in executive session for half an hour. We'll reconvene.
Okay, we are good to go.
Are we good?
Yep.
Okay. We're live.
Mhm.
All right. Item 2C, resolve to exit executive session. I have a motion.
So moved. Second.
Roll call.
Mrs. Kramer?
Yes.
Mrs. Kwiatkowski?
Yes.
Mrs. Mack?
Yes.
Mrs. Wigman?
Yes.
Mr. Dosen?
Yes, we are now out of executive session. We're going to reconvene with our regular meeting agenda. Can we make sure the doors are open?
Yeah.
It's fun. Yeah. Yeah.
When you bring this up, I'm the
All right, are we good? Item 4, President's announcements. I have a couple of things. Anyone who looked at our agenda earlier in the day, you may have noticed we removed one item, and that was the agenda item to approve our handbooks at our 3 schools. We became aware that there was some conflict in the handbook language with one of our policies. So we're going to clean that up and bring those handbooks back for approval in July. We have a regular board meeting. Our normal board meeting is July 19th. We're going to have a special board meeting next month, probably on the 5th, to approve some new hires and to also approve for those who are paying attention to our Highland property, which we have an agreement to sell it to a developer. There was some adjustments to the agreement. The broad agreement stays the same, but there are some adjustments to the agreement that we had discussed, and we need to reapprove that. We don't have to reapprove it, but the board wants to approve it again, just so that it's out there transparently. So that'll be on our agenda next month probably next week when we meet again. And then the last thing is happy summer, everyone. Hope you all had a great school year and you can have a relaxing and restful summer. All right, item 5, board appointments. Cuyahoga Valley Career Center. I heard from Mr. Gilbride, there are no updates from CVCC this month. OSBA Legislative Liaison. Helen, do you have anything for us?
I do. I just, the Ohio legislature is in the process of negotiating the terms of the 2023-2024 state budget. There are a lot of items in the budget, which is supposed to be approved by Friday. We'll see if that actually happens, that are going to affect every public school district in the state, including Brecksville, Broadview Heights. There's some changes to the Fair School Funding Act. There's going to be possibly a very significant expansion of public school vouchers. And if, for interested community members, if you have a problem with any of those things, which I'd suggest that a lot of us should have a problem with this big expansion of vouchers, please reach out to your state senator. Both of our state senators for Brecksville and Broadview Heights, we have 2 different senators are on the conference committee, Jerry Serino and Matt Dolan. Reach out to them and let them know what your stance is on that. They're right in the middle of negotiating the terms of that as we speak. So that's it.
Yeah, thanks. And that is helpful too for outreach to our elected representatives, because they are making decisions in Columbus that have a material effect on our district and many districts across the state. So when they make adjustments to funding, while most of our funding comes locally, we do get a good portion from the state. And if they change the dials and the levers and we end up with less, ultimately it's putting a greater burden back on our taxpayers. So plug in on that and reach out to our elected representatives. It does help. Item 6, superintendent committees, financial liaison, audit committee, Kathleen and myself. There are no updates on that. We're all good. The audit was clean. Permanent improvement committee, Ellen and myself. We had a lot of discussion on it last month, so there's nothing new to report, right? Okay. Board policy committee, Kathleen and Tish.
We will probably be considering changing some board policy at the next special meeting. And there is an upcoming policy probably within the next couple months regarding volunteers. We plan to have a discussion about that this meeting tonight. But we will be discussing volunteers as the volunteer policy, not tonight, but probably coming up.
But we will have a discussion
Yep.
on volunteering and if we want to make changes. So stay tuned. That's later in the agenda. School foundations report, Brittany.
The School Foundation had a successful year this year. They're taking a summer hiatus and will be reconvening in August. Their beginning of the school year activities supplement with or start with the convocation and the awarding of annual teacher classroom grants. So they're excited to be launching next school year soon, but not too soon. We should enjoy summer.
Good, absolutely. Very good. PSO report, Helen.
I do not have any updates today. Sorry.
Words. Item 8, treasurer's announcements. Actually, no, item 7, superintendent's announcements.
There would be
Don't have
none.
any.
Don't look at me.
Yes, although we do have our incoming superintendent, Mr. Jeff Harrison, with us in audience, and so he may be joining us in some of our conversations as the agenda unfolds. Item 8, treasurer's announcements. Craig.
So actually on the topic of PI, just a quick update for the board. We had a short time frame. So Mr. Koss over there and I worked very quickly to try to get some sort of asphalt on the books. So we are planning to have that work actually done in July, and we are looking to get this whole section out from the front of the street paved all the way up to the middle school, and then the loop around up through the softball field and baseball fields.
up to the top of there. So we got very competitive quotes. They say they can do that before school starts. It will be done in July, correct? July 15th. So there's gonna be some construction up here. They're gonna mill and fill. They've got some partial or full depth repair in some spots. So we did a little asphalt study to make sure that where we were looking to fix and spend the money made the most sense. So there's a small section that needs full depth repair. There's some shoulder work that's going to get done so that some of the road, especially in this bend over here, doesn't wash away. So there's going to be some asphalt projects going on. And then we just got done accepting, which will be on tonight's agenda, to accept the roofing bids. We had a very favorable outcome. The bidding estimate was about 500 and was it 86,000? I think. To do the shingled roofing section at the high school. That work is going to also be done before school starts, correct? And we got the lowest bid. This was the largest number of bids I've had since I've been here, which I think is a good sign for competition. And even our roofing consultant with Taylor said he's not seen that many roofing bids come in since probably 08 or 09. We had 9 bids come in. The highest bid was probably right under like 540 and the lowest bid was 374. So there were some significant savings there. And now that Brian is kind of onboarded, we're looking already to be planning then for larger projects next summer to do additional asphalt work, as well as continue on the roofing fixes that we have. And I think we might even still look for asphalt at the high school teachers lot if we can get it for the same price, because it fits within the PI budget. So we're trying to work on that.
So
I have a question about.
go ahead.
So there were some concerns last year, like when I think it was roofing was being done at the same time as children being in the building, possibly. When are they supposed to be done?
Their contract
Can
is done
finish.
before school starts.
And if they're not, like,
That's where the big is.
the one thing I would ask is maybe consider the fact that they do it on the weekends because it's on them. I don't know, but I just know that our parents had some deep concerns with the fumes.
We did it, did it 2 different ways. With these different numbers. One was before school starts and one was after school starts. See what the price is for.
Yeah.
And both the low bid and the second low bid at the same price. You can get it done before school starts. So it's a good guarantee that they have the crews and it goes in there.
And I get that, and I think that was what was supposed to happen last year, and it didn't happen because things happen, right? The rain and everything. And I'm just asking for that to be considered because it did upset some of our parents.
Sure. I don't know. The fumes issue, I don't think was related to roofing. I think it was related to another, I think it was related to other work.
I think it was the floor work at the elementary.
It was interior work that was being done. And I think we had some students in the building that there was miscommunication on whether or not there was going to be anybody in the building or not. But still, it's still, yeah. We still want to be doing that work with no students in the building. So
Yeah, that was the ideal piece of it. And then also the track, I think, is still shut down right now, correct? Still for a month, up to a month. They're redoing some of that piece right now. So that just happened last week, or I guess it's almost been 2 weeks now. So the track is shut
because the
down.
track was just redone. Was this like
So
follow up? Or
It's more of like follow up. So they're putting a protected sealing coat on top of it and they're restriping it.
okay.
So it'll almost look like it's brand new again. And it's going to give us even some longer life out of it because there was some overspray that we had when they did the striping. So they're going to put a layer on top and then put the restriping on. So
The one question I have with Taylor, I know in the past we had a bidding situation where their projected number, all the bids came in way over. And we kind of called them on the carpet like, okay, how did you miss this? So this sounds for the same scenario, but the other direction. So did they overcompensate or did they, even the highest bid was lower than what
it was
they
just a little bit
projected.
lower,
So
but it was
the
actually
landscape changed that quickly on roofing.
well. So I asked the question. I said, or do we think that some of the vendors are getting almost to the point where they're hungry again, for looking for work now that some of the COVID money has been spent and all of that stuff? And he thinks we're at the precipice of that happening. So some people might just be more aggressive. It was a pretty even spread, I think. And I mean, the matrix has been uploaded, so we can look at that when we pass the resolution to accept the bid, but it's kind of, it was 370, 380, I think, and then it's like 4, and it goes up to 500. So it was kind of like all over the board, to be quite honest.
Okay.
So I don't necessarily think he was compensating for it in this scenario.
I mean, it's good news, but you
Yeah,
know, it's also would be good. Yeah, I mean, we're using Taylor to give us a sense of what our spend needs to be to get things
Right.
done. And if they're way off the mark, then on either side, it's not a healthy situation for us.
correct. No, and we were considering almost not using them, but Brian did some more homework and stuff, and we were trying to balance all that out, and we decided to still use them again. So
Okay. Well,
Yep.
maybe keep an eye on where they're coming in on these bids. I mean, they should be coming in.
he was put on alert.
Yeah, okay. No, right. Okay.
And that's it for me.
All right. Item 9, hearing of the public. We have
one.
one. Okay, so I will read it. Hearing of the public, persons wishing to address the Board of Education may do so at this point. No formal action will be taken on subjects that are not included on this agenda until the board has had an opportunity to study them. Comments regarding personnel must be submitted in writing through the office of the superintendent in order for the board to complete the planned agenda in an effective and efficient manner and to provide sufficient opportunities for members of the public to be heard. Hearing of the public shall be limited to a maximum of 60 minutes, during which each speaker shall be limited to a maximum of 3 minutes. I will use a timer on my phone for 3 minutes because we are trying to treat everybody who speaks equally, and everybody gets 3 minutes. And if you go over, then you have to listen to my timer beep.
Okay, Jan Lucas. Please make sure that you push the button and the green light comes on.
Got it. Thank you. I apologize for being late. And
I'm sorry, could
my
you state your
name's,
name and your address, please?
Jan Lucas, and I live at 7684 Winding Way. And what I wanted to talk about today was a little bit about my past and where we are today with the things going on with the Board of Education in the community of Brecksville. When I grew up on the near west side of Cleveland, we watched the shows Leave It to Beaver, I Love Lucy, Ozzie and Harriet, and quiz shows like To Tell the Truth, What's My Line, you know, very easy to watch stuff, and it was a long time ago. But also I walked home for lunch every day from elementary school. I played with my dolls, lining up on the couch and pretending they were my students because someday I wanted to teach, and I did fulfill that dream. I did get to teach. Today, considering the cultural influences in society and a lot of the bureaucracy that goes on in our world, I'm not sure that I could work as a public school educator anymore. And I wanted to thank you, the board members, educators who are not here, obviously, and administrators. And I know that I believe you're the new superintendent. I didn't get to meet you, but I recognize you just from the photograph. So I want to thank you for doing what you do in today's world, because it's not an easy job. I'm especially grateful for when the board held a community engagement meeting to select a new superintendent. And what I learned at that meeting was an overriding message that there was a disconnection in the community among all of our groups: administration, superintendent, Board of Education, teachers, staff, students, parents, families, the entire community of Brecksville, Broadview Heights. We had a lot of things that were not being able to be communicated. Social media is not the answer to reconnect us. And maybe we've been suffering from a COVID lockdown hangover, I don't know. But what many of us see in the community is that there is no in-person organization dealing with immediate parental and community concerns.
And what I would like to do is suggest a weekly in-person community engagement meeting because it was so beneficial in, I believe, finding a new superintendent. And I would like it led by liaison persons who address school concerns to alleviate this void in our school system operations. If we truly respect truth, transparency, and accountability in our schools, we need a platform to hear each other speak. We have new leadership possibilities in the wings who are aware of this void and the good, bad, and ugly in the school system. I believe that these people who have
You could
a new
wrap up,
perspective,
please.
I'm almost done, a new perspective, have excellent analytical skills and personable skills and will lead us in the right direction for the benefit of our children. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing your comments. Is that it?
Mhm.
Or- Okay. All right, moving on to item 10. 10A, resolve to approve the resolution amending the resignation date of Joel Magyar from July 31st, 2023 to July 12th, 2023, and appointing a temporary interim superintendent from July 13th through July 31st as attached. May I have a motion?
Second.
Any discussion? Well, and what this is, pretty self-explanatory. So Joelle was moving up her resignation date. She's actually on using PTO right now. And then in the interim period, we're using Brian Wyckoff as the interim superintendent for a handful of weeks until Jeff Harrison, our new superintendent, who's in the audience, until he joins us officially on August 1st. He's doing transition time right now. So any questions or comments? Roll call.
Mrs. Kramer,
Yes.
Mrs. Kwiatkowski,
Yes.
Mrs. Mack,
Yes.
Mrs. Wigman,
Yes.
Mr. Dosen.
Yes. Item passes 5-0. Item C, resolve to approve the resolution authorizing the treasurer to sign certificates relating to financing improvements by the Julie Billiard School for the former Chippewa School as may be requested by the financier, as long as such certificates do not modify the board's right of first refusal as attached. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
So just to kind of explain this a little bit, we had an agreement to sell, and we already executed it to sell our Chippewa building to this school. The school is doing renovations. They need some financing. Part of that agreement stipulated that while it's their intention to operate it as a school, if they ever pivoted away from that the district be given an opportunity to buy it back, just so there wasn't a situation where they decided, we're not going to run it as a school, and they tried to sell it to some other entity. We wanted to have the ability to step in and look at getting the property back if the board felt like that made sense. But because of that language, they wanted this resolution to help them secure some financing. And this agreement is basically saying, if they take out financing and they take out a loan, and there was a situation where they needed to sell the school and it came back to us, that we would pay off the loan, basically is what this is saying. So it really doesn't change anything. It's really just a comfort level for them to help them with their financial piece for the work that they're doing on the school. Any comments or questions?
No.
Roll call.
Mrs. Kramer,
Yes.
Ms. Kwiatkowski,
Yes.
Mrs. Mack,
Yeah.
Mrs. Wigman,
Yes.
Mr. Dosen.
Yes, motion carries 5-0. Item E, volunteer discussion. Follow up regarding our policy 8120. So earlier in the meeting, when Tish gave some updates on our policy committee, this was one of the items that we wanted to have some discussion with. And I think this is also where Mr. Harrison might come in and offer some of his thoughts too. But basically, there are some new requirements for volunteers to get credentialed to serve as volunteers. And the question becomes, who pays that credentialing cost? What are other districts doing? And what do we want our policy to state?
I don't know that these are new costs.
Yeah, they're not new costs, correct.
Yeah,
There's been some changes, and I can, let Jeff speak to that. I didn't update this because we haven't had time to talk about this fully, but we talked a little bit before. But I was asked, so we moved this just for context, and I was asked to reach out to different districts. Mr. Wyckoff was helpful in that with some of the HR directors at other schools. So he did send out a survey. This was the result of the survey he sent out, and tried to pick obviously like districts. 9 schools responded to his survey, even though he did ask for others. Sometimes we get busy and we don't respond to all the surveys we get. But Hudson was the only school that actually pays for staff credentialing, which is the same as us. So he considers them basically a like-minded in terms of like how we're treating the staff and the volunteers. And then non-regular staff would bear the full cost, or volunteers in this case as well, for any cost of credentialing in order to do a supplemental job. And so we kind of worked to figure out what the costs were. Our current costs are $240, which again, I'll let Jeff speak to, that there's a new coaches toolkit, which we think maybe actually decreases the price. And that could be revised. But then some of the things that, we would talk about to consider are that we do a lot of splitting contracts here. So we do have a large number of split contracts, just so people understand for context and how many people this would ultimately affect. So we do have sometimes where we split a contract of $4,000 by 4 people. So that is 4 credentials versus really 1, because it's 1 position. And then this would have a potential cost to the district if you did do that of 4 people times $240, which could be $199 or $189, I guess. And we did pull the numbers. We have about 188 volunteers and non-employee coaches and advisors. So if you multiply that out kind of times the 240, which it could be less, it's $45,000. And then I'll kind of turn it over to Jeff to talk about the new legislation, what that means, and the potential costs.
Let me just get clarification too, because on that survey, so Hudson's the only other school that pays for staff credentialing. I assume then the other 9 schools do not pay for non-staff.
Yeah, that is how it was presented to me.
Let me just provide context because, yeah, thank you. This started coming up, we were getting emails from people that, this was really putting a burden on a lot of families. And given how low our supplementals are, I mean, they're low everywhere. It's not just Brecksville, Broadview Heights. For example, one coach main coach could make $4,000 if their grandfather, not the grandfather, the other one, $4,200. And, 240 is a lot of money. And then you are talking about people who are getting less than that when you're splitting like 1 main contract. So, the genesis of this was that, there were several emails that asked us, can you please consider, absorbing this cost? So we wanted to make sure that we went and gave this the time that it deserves and considered the fact that maybe we should absorb these costs because quite frankly, in some of our minds, this is a service to us because they're not doing it for the money because of how small it actually is.
Yes, and I think the other thing, is that this does become a part of their credentialing too, though. So I think that some schools are choosing to do it this way because if they choose to coach for us this year and then go somewhere else next year, we paid for the credentialing and then they go somewhere else and they take that credential with them. And obviously you can create language that if they would leave, then they would have to pay back the money or whatever. I'm just putting that out there that credential does go with them. So I don't know if it's still 2 years or 3 years or they change that all the time, but if it's a 3-year credential, for instance, they coach for us for 1 year, we pay the cost, and then they go coach for another neighboring school for 2 years, then we've eaten that cost, just to keep that in.
But I think some of the credentialing they have to do yearly as well.
Some of it, I think.
Okay, it's not, there's the carrying, but then I don't know if it's the CPR, but it's over $100. And so like, I understand with our staff, our certified staff, I can see that, but I'm looking at outside people who are volunteering their time basically for nothing. And so that was the tone of the emails that we were getting.
And just to piggyback on that, there was a lot of concern, and I think we do recognize that during the policy review, Neola was recommending that every single person that walks through the door of a building and volunteer in any type of aspect would need this activity license or this activity permit. And, this is a district that has heavy involvement of family members, parents, grandparents, anyone that's interested in helping the schools out. We rely heavily on volunteers to provide student opportunities. So that just,
So they're paying
they're paying to volunteer, and I don't want to see our volunteer rate go down.
So I'll add a little bit to it. Not being official, not being.
Take it away.
Like maybe be a little, no, I'm just kidding. So first of all, Neola is a service that many of us across Northeast Ohio use, many school districts do. Each representative you have from Neola may have a slightly different opinion and or guidance as to what policy you should adopt as a Board of Education. So the conversation I had with Mr. Wyckoff was, yes, every volunteer steps in our room needs a PAP or a PAV, depending on how old you are, which one it is. It's pupil activity permit. That is not the case, and many school districts do not take that. If I'm volunteering in the library, I'm volunteering at lunch, or I'm the chess club advisor, I don't necessarily need a lot of the requirements that coaches or those involved in activities that have greater risks. So I would tell you, and this is all coming about because 8120 is a new policy. Because before you had 3120 and 4120, two volunteer policies in two different sections. You basically, what ended up happening is you're rescinding those two and adding in 8120 just to streamline it. And then that's where this conversation comes up. Well, who needs the PAP? Most school districts that I'm familiar with and those that I've worked in, it's only our coaches and those that are in activities that have a risk of concussion or heat stroke or things of that nature. The cost isn't quite $240. We've dug into it a little bit more. That is the old cost, I would say. OHSAA has partnered and they are providing a service called Coach's Tool Chest, which then takes all the trainings that they need to get from various different people and puts it into one local one-stop shop. And they offer that to school districts at about $50 per person. But once you're over 100 people, then it goes to $45. If you get over 200, it goes down to $40. We would be in that $45 range, which would bring our cost not to $240. It would be a cost of $190. And that would be for a 3-year period, because for a PAV, you can get it, you can pay to have it for 3 years, 4 years, or 5 years. And then some of those requirements, as you talked about, Mrs. Mack, is some of them you have to do yearly. So the tool chest is $45 a year. So it's 45, 45, 45. Add up all that, it's 190. My recommendation to you would be, as a layperson sitting in the crowd today, that requirement of that 190 would be for those activities that we have done in the past. I would tell you that cost of 240 or 190 would not be for your typical classroom volunteers coming in to help, because we want them in our buildings. We don't want to exclude them. Now, it is important that those volunteers are fingerprinted and vetted, but they don't need to have the concussion training or Lindsay's Law or those other things that are required of our coaches mainly. But I would include marching band in that. Marching band needs to have those trainings and needs to have a PAV because of the activities that they participate in. So Brian Wyckoff and I have been speaking about it at length about the cost. I do believe the cost would be less, but then I also don't necessarily know if 188 volunteers, I don't know if that is athletic volunteers or just volunteers in general for us. That is athletic volunteers. So those 188 volunteers, if they are involved in athletics, that would be who we would be looking to somehow determine how much the district is going to pick up in that. And that is definitely a benefit to both our staff, that their credentialing gets paid for, but then also as volunteers. And if you're looking at economies of scale to a degree, I mean, paying 190 for somebody to be licensed to volunteer is cheaper than paying them a couple of $1,000s a coach.
Is that $45,000 estimate annual or a one-time payment?
It's anyone who's paying the 240. That would be if you took the whole 188. So it would be almost like, because you don't actually have them it's a 3-year cycle. So you're not paying all those fees every single year.
Okay,
So
so
it could
that's,
fluctuate. That's a worst case scenario, because that would be if you paid the 240 every year, which you would not have to do.
okay.
You're gonna have
There's
some
still
of them would
cycling
still
Yeah,
on and
I was
cycling
gonna
off.
say, there's
So it's
still
gonna
gonna
be, right. it's gonna be, that's
Still
probably
gonna
gonna be
be a cost.
ballpark. Yes. The splitting of contracts does come up because many times programs that have extra hands and extra eyes will split contracts because ultimately they aren't doing it for the money. We know that. But at the same time, then if you split it 4 ways, then are we on the hook for credentialing for people, volunteers? So I think that's at the pleasure of the board is which direction we'd like to go.
So what are your thoughts?
My thoughts are you want volunteers, you want to find ways that you're not deterring people from volunteering. But I also don't know if we cover credentialing costs, it would be per contract rather than per person. So if you do choose to split it 4 ways, maybe the district covers the cost of 1 credential and you guys chose to split it 4 ways. I think that's a good compromise because again, coaches are going to get as many people as they can. I think, first of all, it's vital to have them, to have their PAVs in place. But it is, that is, in my experience prior to Bristol Broadview Heights, this was a cost that was bared by the staff and volunteers.
So something that happens is our coaches aren't doing it for the money and they're taking their salary and they're paying themselves. And that's not fair either.
Correct.
So,
I would tell you that the volunteer hours and the work you get with your student athletes and students outweighs $45,000.
here's another, like, just information. And correct me if I'm wrong, but part of the supplemental contract is frozen, isn't it? And the other part was like grandfathered in that it got those raises. So we have people, I don't know how many, because maybe they're
I
all,
believe there's 25 people that are left on the moving scale. Everyone else is on what we call the fixed rate scale.
so that it's fixed.
But that
So-
does, and I learned this when we went through
Okay.
negotiations. So it is fixed, but it is still subject to the base increases.
So it is, oh, it
Yeah,
is.
it is.
It's not, it's
So
not.
eligible.
It is
frozen.
tied to the base
I'm
increase.
sorry. Yeah.
I didn't know that either because it was called fixed. And so at first, when we went through negotiations,
No, it was fixed and then the
So-
recent contract
It-
got tethered back to the
Okay,
base.
because
Just
that made
to the
it
base
even
piece.
worse to me that I thought it was.
yeah, they don't move like steps, but just
Right.
that fixed amount moves.
There's 2% rate, then they get 2%.
Correct.
But the other half,
They can technically, I think it's about 25 individuals. They can still move.
There's
I think
steps.
everyone at this point is actually on the highest step.
Yeah, they're probably. the
okay, I
highest
just,
step.
yeah.
And
there's
then
some
then it's
people
subject to
that's-
base increases
yeah,
as well.
I know.
Pretty significant.
I guess I just wanted to also highlight the fact that at least in the survey that we did of the 9 schools, we already are an outlier in paying for the credentialing for our staff. And it sounds like nobody is paying for non-staff. So I hear what you're saying, and I understand we want to encourage volunteers and whatnot. But part of the reason to outreach other districts to find out, are we, what's best practice? What are most districts doing? And certainly we can always go our own way. But that is part of the outreach, right? Because there are a lot of things, right, that we charge families for that the schools never charge, from pay to participate to parking in the high school to fees at the beginning of the year. I mean, look, it's just the reality in almost every district that they're paying our families are paying more fees and cost sharing today than they were 30 years ago. It doesn't make it right. It's just an acknowledgement of how things have changed, dynamics have changed from a financial standpoint. And so it's a good conversation and we can certainly talk about it, and wherever the majority lands on this, that's the direction we'll head in. But it is interesting to see what are and we've used this many other times to say, geez, are we doing what everybody else is doing? Are we doing something completely different? And then we can make an informed choice of like, yes, we want to do this.
One thing I will caution too is probably in the survey of the districts, and I don't know who they are, and I'm not painting with a broad stroke here, but there are volunteers in the athletic realm, being an athletic director for 10 years, who will volunteer and not have a PAV or a PAP. OHSA made some changes a few years ago at the state tournament level that they will check those sitting on the bench to make sure they have the proper credentials. Well, there are individuals who will volunteer at a freshman JV level or volunteer but don't participate in game day that are volunteering and they don't have the credentialing. And that school district may not even know that. So that's one thing to consider, that when they talk about not covering the cost, well, it's because some of those volunteers aren't incurring that cost either, because they're choosing not to get it. And that district may or may not be allowing it or not even knowing about it. I'm not saying that they're intentionally trying to break the rules, but as a volunteer, I don't know if I'm going to be there every day. And I don't want to be sitting on the bench because I'm not really technically a coach, but I do want to volunteer in the program. So that could skew some of those 9 districts as well.
So I want to take a position on this, and I started this conversation initially with this and, but the thing is all the fundraising our parents do, ridiculous amounts of fundraising. And our coaches are leading them. I am asking us to recognize the fact that that is a servant job. It's just a servant job. And I am asking us to show the respect to these people. And I like your idea of splitting, maybe it's one, but I'm asking us, it's for the benefit of us, this institution, this company. And the thing is we should pay that. And respectfully, and I don't know who was surveyed. I can tell you where I work, that's a lower middle class school and there's no way the people could afford this. So we're almost saying, well, because you can, then we're going to ask this. And so I would ask this board, I understand that things at the legislative level might not turn our way, but I'm also recognizing that our parents and our coaches, most of them are carrying this burden. And I would like to pay them for working for us, what it takes to work for us.
Well, just to be clear, this is just a discussion. So is there a need for the board to give guidance today at this meeting on this topic?
I don't think you can approve 8120 as policy until you make that decision, because that's the choice, that's the option of who will pay the cost of the
So
credential.
Yeah, it depends on how far we kick the can.
So,
Because right now
Well,
our
if we
old
want to add any
policies are.
policy changes or any language to the policy around any conditions around if it's a 3-year or if it's a 3-year certification and the coach moves to another district and that credential goes with them, do we want to
in that
request
case,
that
you
compensation?
would be taking $90 away from the total, because it's that coach's tool chest is $45 a year. And that's what is the ongoing cost beyond the initial. So if I coach for 1 year, you paid $190 to get me credentialed. I leave in year 2, then we don't have to cover that person for that 45 for that year and 45 the next year.
Okay.
So really what walks out the door is roughly $100
Okay.
if that person leaves.
Yeah, my other concern around this is I know back in the spring, there were several supplemental, or there was one meeting in particular with several individuals listed on the supplemental approval list that were volunteers who had vacated their seat. And so I'm worried about that influx or that trend. Again, one data point isn't, anything to make a policy on, but it would be concerning to me if that was a regular occurrence that we had several volunteers leaving after covering their credentials.
Yeah, I think that it doesn't happen a ton, but yeah, we do probably have some coaches that sign up as a volunteer and then they actually never do it. But the question would be whether we would, wherever you are in process of,
Right.
did they already have it? Did they not have it before they resigned or quit or whatever? So, but I mean, valid point.
But we could put something in there that said that you would have to cover the cost or repay us. Couldn't we? Could we write
I
something?
mean, you can. I mean, you have a non-employee, and if they are volunteering, we can go to small claims court. You know what I mean?
Okay,
Like, just
really?
because, I mean, that's the
Yeah.
problem is that how do you get it back if someone says they're going to volunteer and then
Yeah,
you say,
Well, why
I
not?
can give me my.
yeah, okay.
Again, if we wanted to do this, why not say, we'll, for non-staff, we'll throw a $45 a year or whatever the annual fee is extra onto the stipend or whatever the supplemental agreement is, and say, hey, so instead of paying $190 and then somebody leaves after 2 years and then trying to claw back $100 or whatever it is, we just say whatever that annual. And are we saying 45 would cover per year, Jeff, from your
No, so
experience?
what the
There would
costs
be
are,
extra.
yeah.
You said about 100.
It's gonna be 100, it's 190. So if I'm coming brand new in and I gotta get my PAP, it's gonna be $190 to get my PAP, which is good for then 3 years.
Okay.
Because when you sign up, you can sign up for 3, 4, or 5.
Okay.
So when we're figuring these costs, we said, oh, let's just go with 3. So it's
Okay.
3 years. That's $190. I got it. Then in year 2, I have to cover $45 to still have access to the coach's tool chest, because you have yearly training you got to do. And then in year 3, I'd have to have another 45. Okay. And then year 4, I'm back at 190 again, because I got to renew everything.
Okay. So you could take that and average it out. So if it was 190, 45, 45, so that's what, that's 280. And then if you divide that by 3, you could call it 300. So you, like you said, like $100 a year. I mean, another way, could another option, if the board wanted to pay for non-staff, which is still a discussion, could it be arranged in a way that says we'll give $100 stipend per year to cover credentialing costs?
And look at my friend down there. Think about
When are you looking at?
$100 stipend per year, and by the time they get it, it's gonna be less.
Well, you can do it retroactively, yes, at the end of the season to prevent that situation. We'd have to look at some of that stuff from a legal perspective, just because it's like, because the supplementals are tied to, and now these are volunteers, so it's a little different. But we'd have to make sure we're not in any violation of what the VEA agreement would have in place, because then we're paying their stuff. So I don't think that they would, but we would want to double check all of that stuff to make sure that they're not going to want any type of additional compensation on top of that for stuff we're already
Let me
paying for.
ask you this, which one thing I'm not clear on is that, we have contracts and some of them are split. So, I get, okay, it's a $4,000 position. 4 people are doing it. So each of them gets $1,000, right? So do we have people that are volunteering that are taking no compensation but needs this credentialing?
Correct. So like wrestling, for instance, I think is one of the sports that has, I'm not 100% positive, but I think
So-
they have somewhere from 8 to 10 volunteers.
So could another option being, because technically somebody who's getting a supplemental, even though they're low, but they're not doing it for the money, they're not putting money out of pocket per se, because in that example, the $1,000, even if they spent $200, right, you're still netting $800. You're actually not taking money out of your own coffers. You're getting, could another option be saying, let's make sure nobody has to take money out of their own pocket and say, hey, if there's any volunteers that have receiving no compensation, then we'll cover their credentialing?
I don't think they're volunteer if they're getting compensated. So I think when we're talking about volunteers, we're talking about people who are not getting a supplemental, not getting paid, strictly showing up to volunteer. Those then non-teachers who are on a supplemental contract, I could see where you'd say, well, you're getting paid. You could use the money from supplemental pay for your credentialing. So we're stuck paying, not stuck. We are currently paying our union members, our staff, credentialing. It's in their contract. Then you have those who are bargaining unit members who are on a supplemental. They still need the PAP, but they're being compensated at a low rate to do that. And then you have just the strictly straight volunteer who are there out of the goodness of their heart. Now, I will also say, as a former athletic director, you'll have volunteers who are there, but they're not there all the time. There's a reason they're volunteering typically, because they can't make that commitment to be there. So, I mean, you kind of have 3 categories of individuals that we're talking about here. One was already covered, and we're going to be covering it. And then you have the non-teacher or non-bargaining unit member, and then you have the true volunteer. And then paying them $100 off credentialing, they're no longer volunteers. I'm not a lawyer, but I'm sure our legal team would have something to say about that, because now they become employees and onboarding process and everything else. So.
Is this like do we pay for public school works every year? Okay, so this is actually no different.
That's what the coach's tool chest is. It's basically public school
Right,
work.
so public school works is something that we do with our at lunch
our
day, everybody.
Everyone,
Okay, and we pay a
including
flat,
board members.
we pay a flat fee, and some of those people leave us during the year, so we're still paying that flat fee. So I'm not seeing how this is any different than that. We're paying a flat fee to have.
I think it's
Maybe I'm wrong, okay, but.
only like $3,000, though, I think is where the difference would come in. It's a very small software fee that we pay
It's
for that.
3,000 for the whole district, for everything.
That's the annual renewal.
Okay.
It may have been more to sign up, I
Okay,
guess, but
so
it's not
it
as,
is different, but
it's much
it is a flat
cheaper.
fee. Does this tool chest also, and I'm thinking of a positive, allow us then to see who hasn't completed theirs? So when, we were talking today, we want everybody to have their paperwork in by a certain time. So maybe in the future, we could approve all of those. Would this allow us, how you get a notification that so-and-so hasn't completed their stuff and it'll send an automatic thing? That might be a challenge Mr. Maslona has seen, is to get these people to get their paperwork in.
Yeah.
And this might help us now that it's a one-stop shop. So it's kind of, we're paying for this, and then we also have oversight over it to make sure that people are falling in line. or-
Yeah, I mean, going this route and providing it is also giving you a level of protection as well, liability wise, because then you are assured that all volunteers do have the proper credentialing to cover us. I have not personally worked into coach school chess because it is relatively new, but I'm sure assuming that we pay as a district, we have back end services that we'd be able, I would think that'd be part of the system.
We could see who has completed what,
Because we have to sign them up, you know, because
right?
and all of that. So I'm making the assumption without having Mr. Mazzalone here, but I would think we'd have that ability to check to make sure credentialing was done.
Okay.
But the only other comment I would make is, given that we did a survey of 9 and we're already doing more than 8 of those districts and none of them include this, I'd like to see a broader, before I would want to commit to going down this path, I'd like to see a broader survey of how unusual is this? I mean, you know, are we getting volunteers that are saying, well, I'm not volunteering because this cost is prohibitive? You know, I'm sure that it dissuades some, but that's got to be the case in all districts if nobody's really doing this. I mean, I would like a little more data, because it's from the first set of surveying that we did, it sounds like we would be a bit of an outlier if we went down this path. And it's not, not that I'm against going down the path, but I'd like to understand how much of an outlier will we be? Is this something we really need to do? If this is the standard practice in most districts, you know, does this make sense for us to do this? Because it does add on to our cost.
I think we should survey, like, not just our typicals also. I think like around us in the, you know, not in inner city Cleveland necessarily, but it's such a given that our parents are going to step up and pay this amount. And what I'm asking us is, you know, they've told us we're doing enough. So I'd like to see, if we're surveying, let's go to places, Parma, Brooklyn, let's go and see, because I can't believe that those parents are paying, the volunteers are paying that amount. So
Yeah, I mean, we can
it's
definitely,
the assumption, I think. that
we can cast the web a little wider.
And I do think we will find districts who have volunteers who are not required to get the PAV. They have fingerprints, you know, which comes in at roughly $60, I think, for fingerprinting. But so that'll be another kind of thing that we're gonna have to make a personal contact just to see how they treat their volunteers. They have PAV. But I do think we now have clarity on 8120, that when we're talking about the PAV, we're only talking about those areas that we deem, Board of Education Superintendent deem necessary to have a PAV. We're not talking chess club, we're not talking library aid, we're talking those involved in those activities.
Well, and I guess on this same vein, Jeff, just like you brought this insight to us that says, hey, you know, your Neola rep, you know, may have a different view than the one that you've used. And then how far do you go with credentialing people, right? Somebody coming in for a Halloween party, we need, you know, and so all of a sudden, and it's sounding like even on some of these volunteers, even on the athletic side, maybe some districts aren't, you know, credentialing everyone. And so you know, can we take a look at that and see where our requirements are? Because it sounds like there might be some gray area out there, which you could then use some interpretation about who do we think needs to be credentialed and who doesn't.
You're correct, but I will say OHSA is very clear on all coaches who are on the bench and involved with an athletic team must have it. So if our volunteers want to be involved as a coach, meaning on the bench, in the chair, the different on the field of play, they have to have it. However, there may be some school districts that have volunteers who come and throw BP to the baseball team, but they never sit in the dugout. That person does not need to have a PAV, and that's where our latitude would come in. Same with Halloween parties or those different aids. The policy 8120, that's why I was a little forward. We use Neola as well, and I have a different rep in my current position than we have here, and they all have their own interpretations. But when you read 8120, it does not say anywhere in there about everyone needing the PAV. So that's when Brian and I had this first conversation. He told me that. I'm like, where are you getting this interpretation from? And so we cleared that up, that we will only require the credentialing from those that were required by law to do.
Yeah, and I think that would be helpful to frame in this discussion more, right? Just like the cost you mentioned about the toolkit, right? And so all of a sudden the cost is not $240. Maybe it's, you know, maybe it's different. Maybe it's $100 a year. I mean, when my daughter ran track, I would volunteer to do timing.
Correct.
Not every time, but
Yep.
when I could make it, I would be up there. So I don't know if I went.
That's
half
a great
dozen
example.
times. So I don't recall ever having to get credentialed.
Nor
Do I
should
need-
you in
So,
that instance.
so, when we look at 188 volunteers, does that include
Yeah, I'm not
all?
sure.
So
We'll have to look
maybe
back.
we need to, take a deeper dive on these numbers to say like how many volunteers, let's look at the interpretation of who actually needs to be credentialed. Let's maybe get a tighter number about who actually needs to be credentialed. What would the cost be? And then maybe it becomes a lot easier of a decision because maybe we're not talking about $45,000. Maybe we're talking about whatever, $10,000. I don't know.
No problem. We can absolutely do that.
Any other comments,
No.
questions?
More information will be better.
Okay,
I
so
mean, is this something that we could do in the next month or so? We have it
July.
Jeff has all kinds of free time.
for the next school year,
Mm-hmm.
before we start that whole. thing.
Ideally, as an athletic director, say, so that would be the next meeting. So
Okay.
it wouldn't take hard to survey people. Well, we're gonna contact all the schools in our league because they're easy to contact.
Right,
And then we'll hit the school districts that are contiguous to us
yeah,
and kind of touch us, and not just similar districts. To get an idea.
okay.
It won't be a problem. We'll have it.
So the plan is we'll circle back next month at our regular board meeting, July 19th. We'll have more data to look at. And then hopefully we can have another healthy discussion and provide direction about whether, because ultimately we're talking about, do we want to update our policy with changes on the credentialing costs. So stay tuned. We'll revisit this next month.
Thank
All
you,
right.
Mr. Harrison.
Yes, thank
All right,
you.
item 11A, resolve to approve the 2023-2024 ESC admission of pupils contract as attached. Item B, resolve to approve the 2023 ESC extended school year contract as attached. Item C, resolve to approve the 2023-2024 Cleveland Clinic Learner School for Autism contract as attached. Item D, resolve to approve the Cleveland Hearing and Speech contract as attached. Item E, resolve to approve.
Oh, sorry.
Yep. Resolve to approve the Special Olympics Ohio MOA as attached. Item F, resolve to approve the high school textbook adoption as attached. Item G, resolve to approve the 2023-2024 job sharing agreement as attached. Item H, resolve to approve the property casualty and liability insurance coverage proposal effective July 1st, 2023 as attached. Item I, resolve to approve the BBH High School AP Biology 2 Stone Lab trip. Item J, resolve to approve superintendent's other business items A through I. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, so Craig and or Jeff.
Well, I'll just
Wanna-
keep people in. Well, some of the contracts are the typical ones that we have for, if there's any questions for the ESC or the ESY, the autism. I think those are the ones, we did some of those last month as well. The Special Olympics one is new, so I will let either Jeff or Cassie to speak about it.
Please. Yes, please.
The Special Olympics is partnered with like Unified Sports. So it's a great organization that comes into the school district that allows us inclusion opportunities. So they partner with getting partners with inclusion peers that go with them to sporting events that we are able to host and compete with other members. So we are looking at cornhole at the middle school right now is one that we're looking at. And then at the high school, and also looking at cornhole and basketball. They help our students get the uniforms, provide the equipment. And the only part that we do, of course, is like the transportation to help them get to in those events. It's pretty great. And we're pretty excited about it. Any questions?
I'm glad that, I'm really excited when I read over it. And I knew it was new, so I'm glad that you got up to kind of further explain it, but more opportunities for our kids. I love it.
That's fantastic. Yeah.
And I mean, it's a great piece of it with, again, the inclusion part of it.
Absolutely.
But then just again, more opportunities. They have a lot more that we can expand on as we go through, but we're gonna start with those two.
So, yeah.
Yes.
That's great.
So we have our high school textbook adoptions. I will let Dr. Martin say a few words. Sure. about the process and the different programs that we are adopting.
Good evening. So the 3 textbook adoptions that were up, it's academic ELA 9 through 12. French, we are restarting our French program, and AP Euro. So that's kind of the one-off that the College Board is asking us to consider the recommended text that we are to buy. So just to kind of start with the French, the restart of the French program, we concluded a community survey for rising 8th graders if they were interested in taking French, as well as high school students. When we concluded that survey, we had 313 respondents, and there was a pretty high level of interest in taking French. So we had about, at that time, 25 middle schoolers for French 1, and high school, I believe it was 35, and those numbers have grown a little bit. So it looks like we are going to be able to run 3 sections of French next year, which started us in the motion of looking at, so we gathered the data, gathered the input from the community, and it started us in the motion of looking for the right staff member, because really we don't want to do a one and done. We want this to be a vital, robust world language program. I'm all for multilingualism, more than 3 languages, but I think if you're going to be an elite district, you have to have at least 3, and 3 very viable languages. So we've accomplished that. We found the right staff member. We think she's going to grow the program in the future. She's already been in several times. She has the entire first semester planned out, almost the second semester. So we really think she's going to grow that program. She's got some great ideas on how to do that into the future. And the kids are really, really excited as well. So the AP Euro, that was, we took the recommendation from the College Board. We got it down to 2 textbooks. And what we did was, and I'll explain this a little bit more with the ELA, is we had the community in, or invited the community in to review the products that we were considering. So the ELA, that started back in December as well. We engaged with the high school leadership and the department chair, I think it's only one now, and kind of set forth the plan. Again, looking at the data, what are we lacking? What do we need? This is important. Academic, ELA 9 through 12, ELA 2, which is the remaining ELA test for the state test. Our students traditionally do very, very well. Newsflash, they are in the mid-90s again this year. So that'll come out as the data continues to be scrubbed, but they're doing very, very well. So we didn't know how much we wanted to tweak it. We had to look to see what was out there. I charged the department with giving it a legitimate look, and there's not a lot of products out there, but there were probably about a half a dozen. They came back to my perspectives into literature. And there again, we kind of re-examined, did a deep dive in our values, our beliefs, and our vision. We ran it through the 4 quadrants and the competencies in the portrait of a graduate, try to stay true to our strategic plan. And then obviously got the products in, got reps in to talk to them at length. We then, once the teachers filled out rubrics, and there were 2 rubrics that I asked them to fill out. The first rubric is the official board adopted rubric from 2003. But it's okay. It's got some good things in there. And then I have another general rubric that I came up with some input that incorporates all of the official board rubric, as well as the portrait of a graduate and the alignment to content standards. In 2003, we didn't have something called Common Core. We weren't talking about aligning standards, state standards to materials we were buying, unfortunately. So we got that down to 2 products, 2 textbooks, and those are currently up for review. And I know on the post it says 30 days. But what I want to do in my department is I want anything that we currently use and anything we consider adopting in the future to be up for review for forever. So you can come in, stop in. I've got a nice little facility. You can come in, you can do a review. What I ask is good critical feedback. Fill out the rubric. What I did incorporate with the newer general rubric review was a portion where there could be a narrative. And those were helpful and telling. The other ones, it's a rubric, it's NA 0 to 4, and 3 and 4 is what most of the products got because we had the teachers and the experts narrow it down to, the 2 top products. So most of the community reviews received 3s and 4s, which is, meets most criteria or, displaying all criteria. So, we had 10 people come in to review. Most of them, it was 7 rubrics for the ELA, 1 for AP Euro, and there were no French reviews. So Spanish would have been better, but there wasn't one pattern that was discernible. It didn't emerge immediately. Again, most of them got 3s and 4s. Some of the feedback was, do teachers have the appropriate supplemental materials, which I thought was legitimate. One of the things that was not on the old or the official board rubric is differentiation. I incorporated that. Unsurprisingly, that feedback came out that there should be some more supplemental materials for differentiation to meet all learners. We've got the highest influx of EL students this year than we've ever had. So, materials sometimes are trying to catch up with that. They can't predict the future as we can't. So, again, with the narrative, I thought we got some insightful comments and people did write. We got some community members, as you know, they're very talented. We got some community members that have master's degrees in curriculum and instruction, and they were able to provide some insightful information for us. Why do I want to do this and continue to do this? So in the fall, I will be able to share these comments, share this with the ELA teachers, with the French, well, there's no French, but with the AP Euro teacher, because it'll help give insight. And if we do have to supplement, or we do have to think differently about areas such as differentiation, we can do that. So it has been helpful to do that. And again, I think I have kind of the perfect office to do that. We set up 2 rooms where people can come in and review it at their leisure. Some people stayed hours, some people didn't. And I was asking a lot. I said, please fill out 2 rubrics per product. And that was tough. There was a lot of stamina issues there. Some people stayed a couple hours and said, I'm out, but still nonetheless gave good feedback. As you know, I could probably stay up here all night and talk about my work, but do you have any questions, comments?
Thoughts? Mine's super quick. Just a clarifying question around the number of participants from our community. So you've indicated that 8 to 9 individuals from our community came in and reviewed these curriculums. Is that correct?
So I'm not standing over anyone with a clipboard.
Sure.
I don't have a flashlight in their
Yeah.
eyes.
You don't have.
Less than a dozen?
There were 10 people who came and signed. There was a sign-in sheet to get in.
Okay.
It's not like, top security, but you had to sign in your name, your address, and what product you were going to review.
Okay.
And then each of the rubrics, you had to sign your name and date it.
Sure. Okay.
But again, it was a lot of work that I was asking for people to do. So 10 people came, 8 people filled out rubrics. Not everyone filled out both rubrics for all the products, which is okay. I was going to sit over and make people do it. And again, I was just welcoming feedback, which is giving me feedback on maybe I need to have a more streamlined process that could be a little quicker. I think having the hard copy manuals there, teacher manuals, is helpful for community members because you can see kind of what the teacher sees. I don't want to make it digital because I don't know if it's going to be as interactive. Sometimes I was available, a lot of times I was not, so I wasn't able to kind of interact with people. They came in, they filled it out, and they left. That's kind of answer your question.
Did you have anybody who came in and had a lot of negative feedback? And if you had, what do you think you'd do with that?
I didn't interface. I was either at a meeting out of my office and I wasn't able to interface. So a little bit of feedback from folks that were there that, I think people are asking questions beyond the actual curriculum review, and they might not have been in a position to, answer some of those. Some of those went beyond the 3 areas or contents that were being reviewed. So, once I think if it grows and I can say, oh, okay, if you want to look at that, we can do that as well. Again, this was 3, this is the beginning. I have grandiose visions of having it all available for people to come in and give us, insightful reviews. So
just off of it, because I know you like data. So not that you would have dove completely into your respondents, but you mentioned that some of the respondents have a background in education, including master's degrees in curriculum and instruction. Do you know off the top of your head, out of the 8 or 9 that filled out anything, how many of them had a background in education and really understood curriculum development, instruction?
One self-disclosed in the review that he or she had a background in curriculum. And then another one I know of is a community member, and I know that she has a master's degree in instruction.
So 2.
That I know of.
So, and then my only other, it's not a question, it's just a comment. I am myself very excited that we are adding French. Like, I think that that's fantastic. Given that, I believe our Chinese, participation in Chinese has, so adding French, and there's so much interest, that's fantastic.
The best is yet to come.
Right?
It's gonna be great.
Yeah, and I know that, there's, I just know certainly there have been families, at least one that I know of, that has moved into the district and their child was able to take French in the district that they moved from, but had to, seek opportunity outside of our district to finish that French credit. So we'll have it now.
Yeah,
That's great.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So thank you for doing this.
Yeah.
I saw a post on Facebook. Not that I would look at Facebook,
What's that?
but I saw posts of announcements that said,
Yes.
that had come to, review this. And when I first started on the board, as well as Mark, we would get a bag. Dr. Kalovic would fill a bag with textbooks, and our former board member, Mr. Tryon, would happily, we all took them back, but he would go through all of them. And it was something that at least we saw. I love the fact that our parents are seeing this. I always felt like, I understand I was elected to represent, but I wanted them to see it too, because I think there's a lot of misconceptions of what are in those books and what's, happening in a classroom. So this is the beginning of a really good accountability to our community. I like that you use social media. And I think that, I did hear people talking about this, and a couple people came in because they thought we were trying to give a warning that something was in there. So so hurry up, you better go check. And they came here to check it out to see if there was something in there having to do with some controversial theories, I would say. So I am happy that we have that. We should continue to do that. And, however you make that process easier, the better, but please continue to use social media. And in the end, we can say to the public, if there are concerns, we can say, you had this opportunity and we give it to you yearly. So if you are concerned, come next year. But right now, we know we adopt these for years, so this is quite a financial investment. So it's not like we're going to pivot next year, but we are doing that the best that we can to get the word out. And it did get out. I heard people walking and talking, and they stopped me and said they were going to come take a look for some things that might be in there. And I said, no, that's not what we're saying, but I'm glad that they came, and I know that they did, and they saw that there wasn't anything in there. And that's important, for us to be accountable to our community.
Yep.
So thank you. Thank you.
Mr.
Well-
Max just stole my thunder and I'll sit close to the podium.
Yeah.
But Dr. Martin and I spoke at length today about this process because this is the most important thing we do as a school district is what we use to instruct our students. And just because it's up for adoption, we can review it anytime. And these are the conversations as educators we want to have because much of the belief of what happens in the classroom is gained through just opinion and social media and rumors. And that's not the case at all. Our educators are doing wonderful things with wonderful tools. And it's just this adoption process just forces it into the public. But I would tell you that Dr. Martin and myself will be more than happy to talk curriculum with anyone and really take a deep dive if somebody has that interest in doing so. And we will be a school district that will welcome that type of feedback as well as conversation, because that's what we should be talking about is what we do with our students in the classroom. So thanks. I just want to support the great work that he's doing. I'm not going back.
So I have
Lies.
You know, I think some concerns we got from feedback from the public were some supplemental things that were being used by teachers on top of what's adopted. And that's another thing. And I know, like, you know, because I teach language arts, gifted language arts. Before I read a book, I show my supervisor what I'm doing, what I'm reading, and I explain that. And we actually curriculum map it. So now you can see, here's what's going on, and we give that to our parents. Or we can't micromanage our teachers, and I am not asking to do that. But what I am asking is, you know, a novel is a significant time investment. And so there's certain novels that I don't pick up anymore, like The Jungle by Upton Sinclair. Wonderful book, in my opinion, but as an educator, but it's not something that I feel comfortable doing in this, you know, time. But that said, like, how are we watching what is happening in the classroom without micromanaging? Are we doing that? Are we mapping? Are we?
So that's best practice is knowing what is in the content that you're going to teach. That's
Right.
just best practice. And I think as Jeff spoke, we're going in a more deeper dive, more meaningful direction. And we're trying to get a handle on, as board policy does state that teachers can use supplemental material. I'm not going to stand up here and say that I have a handle on everything, but I want to get a better handle on all supplemental materials. And so that is going to have to be part of the curriculum mapping, part of the course of studies, which I envision being publicly accessed online or in person in my office, should you want a follow-up conversation. That I know that's maybe down the road. It's a lot of work. There's only one of me. That requires a lot of release time, as you know, for teachers to come in. I'm not going to write a course of study and say, here you go. You got to get people in a room. You got to talk about, let's put in all of the supplemental materials that you're using for your course now. And that's going to have to be a live document that's going to have to continually update. I think my department can do a better job. And I do have pretty grandiose ideas and visions of this all being accessible online so that people can see, all right, this is what my kid is learning. This is what the teacher's doing the first quarter in this class. And here are the standards that will be covered and here are the outcomes. That's what I want to see. And I don't want it to be a mystery. I don't want people to Google it to try to find it. I want it to be very accessible, 1-2 clicks away, that type of thing. But I'll get there. We'll get there. We're just not there yet.
3 years where I worked to do vertical alignment and mapping. It was just this summer that we actually managed to have all of that actually be something live that our parents can actually see that will go out at the beginning. So I understand that. I think it's just starting. We are aware now that we have to make sure that we are as transparent as possible. And this is the beginning of that. Is what I'm saying.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I guess maybe on the topic of streamlining, you know, the process going forward, you know, because the structure required a decent amount of sacrifice, had to come in, had to look at the, you know, the hard copy materials, fill out the rubric. You know, I guess I would offer, like, and maybe challenge you, like, why not put it out digitally and let a broader swath of the community access it, right? I mean, you could still have some type of a gatekeeper, you got to give name and address or whatever to say, okay, and but even if people look at it and don't fill out a rubric, but at least they satisfy that, we're not trying to sneak in some, special curriculum that people don't, because it's so much, you hear that the time that we live in, people are very skeptical, and these false narratives get out there, and then people just run with them. And it's like, we're a public school district. Everything is available. You can see anything. Nobody's hiding anything. There's not like a shell game going on behind the scenes of like, don't show them this, don't show them that. It's all out there. But, some people, so the more we can be transparent, the more that we can put this type of stuff out there, even if, 6 people review it and fill out the rubric, but 40 people went out and saw it. Hey, is that hurting us, or is that helping us? And hopefully maybe the more that we can go down that path where we can get this out even to a broader audience and make it accessible, I think that helps us in the long run.
I agree, and I will, if the publisher companies will give me access. Sometimes they'll give you a sample and then charge you if you don't return it, but they'll give you a sample. Digitally, they'll give you like a one-time password that'll only work, with my login credentials. So they get goofy like that sometime. I just wish they would have some general, but then, I don't know. It's all proprietary, but we'll do our best to get it out there.
Yeah, that was going to be my comment. I can't imagine a publisher is going to post it online without us paying for it. So they need you, people are going to have to come in, of course, until it's purchased.
That's what happens sometimes, and they won't give it unless I request it and they see it's from, an official school, website or email.
You've been doing this for months, so how long have you been, I've been seeing your posts for at least 2 months, am I correct or not?
Yeah, so what I try to do is I want to at least have it available to the public for 30 days. But then, like lately I've been thinking, well, do I just say it's available forever?
Right.
This I wanted feedback on the 2 final products for the ELA, the one we've been using, and we're going with a different one into literature. They're both good. We just think there's slight advantage. If you look at what the teachers believe the kids need, they want them to be, strong readers, writers, critical thinkers, things like that. There was just an edge. It wasn't like one was bad and one was good, but I wanted to hear what people, non-educators and those with some experience, had to say. So I'm considering maybe taking those dates off of there, or in the future.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm thinking about how to make this a better process.
The pilot teach, you ran into COVID at the last reading series I think you did.
Yeah, that was,
All right,
we
so
had
pilot
virtual,
season.
I know.
On that pilot you have, and they give you critical feedback, that's great, then this is the next step, and have the public look at it, but that, when it happened in the past, that wasn't anything you could control, you couldn't run a pilot, you were already had to go down a path, so, and I get that, but, it's great to hear that our educators were part of this process, that's so huge.
Mhm.
It's great to hear now that we're back doing what we did when I first started on board, which is the public, at least, it was just elected officials were looking at it, but this is a whole nother layer now, so it's good.
Okay.
And maybe just always having it, like you said.
I think so.
Once you
Yeah.
have it.
Yeah.
Dr. Martin, I have one final question. You talked a little bit about the notion that there are 2 rubrics, or there was the board adopted rubric and the supplemental rubric. What do you need in order to make this process easier for you and the public from a rubric perspective? Do you need the board to adopt a new rubric?
So part of my workflow plan that I've created for next year is this. So I took all of the board policies, administrative guidelines that deals directly with curriculum instruction. And I would say that, while this is not going to be solved overnight, please know, we probably need to do a really deep dive board policy administrative guideline audit. I would say, if you want to start with my department, that would be great. because some of this stuff needs to be updated. I was in 2003. This is a decent rubric and we had to add to it. But some of the language is outdated and just that we're 2 decades. So we probably need to really look at the 50,000-foot view. What does board policy say? What's it requiring us to do? And how are we carrying that out through administrative guidelines? So maybe we start small. I'd be happy to put together a plan where I think it would make sense in succession, what we should consider first, next, in subsequent years. But I think that would be, because sometimes I'm looking at board policy and oh, this one's from 2003 or this one's from 2007. Oh, well, this one was updated last year. You know, so it's tough because there's a lot out there and then you feel like you miss something and you got to go back and.
For policies like October-ish, I feel like.
Should put your microphone on.
Yeah,
Next board policy meeting will be October. That first swipe, that first, like, trying to put it all together, is that something that you could be a part of? Could we have that where we have our consultant there and just that first try at the adoption? Because he's pretty, you know, he's great at giving recommendations and compliance. We can look in board docs. I'm sure we can look at other districts and what they may have. So maybe we don't even have to reinvent it. We just need to update it.
Yeah, I don't know if Neola gives similar recommendations to all districts, you know, at one fell swoop, but.
No, but you can search in, but you can search in board docs and see what other districts have. You can put in, so we
Yeah.
could search it and see if if it already exists. Although I know you enjoy that work and that.
Yeah.
Oh, your joy.
Because I lead
But-
such
but
an
I'm
active
saying
social life, I
possibly
have
our-
an abundance of time, right?
So maybe October, when the next, or whenever our next time is, maybe we could just try to at least get things moving in the direction they should, based on what you recommend and, right?
I could definitely give a priority list in the 2000s, in the ones that deal directly with curriculum,
Okay,
board policy wise. I mean, very similar to the discussion
Yeah.
we had earlier, so.
you could search, we could look in board
Yep.
docs and see what exists
Oh,
currently. in
I already
other
got it
districts.
ranked, yeah, I got
All
the
right.
spreadsheet if you want.
I feel, okay, that's awesome. All right,
It's part of the work.
I love policy, which is a sickening, you are sick like me. So, yeah, okay, all right, so maybe that next meeting we could do that, okay?
I think
It
that's
shouldn't be
great,
till
yeah.
October. Yeah.
I think it's, you guys, policy is March and September and PI is April and October.
Is it?
Mhm.
I think so.
Yeah, now that she said that, yeah.
I don't know, that.
We can make every meeting about policy if you'd like.
I would love.
We gotta
Mr.
get-
Harrison would love it. Okay, Dave.
So,
Oh, sorry.
one last question. So with the introduction of French, do we anticipate somewhere down the road a trip to France, and would it require board supervision?
All five? All
Something to think about.
five.
You hablo español? I mean, I don't.
Digo
All right,
también.
any other questions or comments for Dave? Thank you,
Thanks,
Dr.
everyone.
Martin.
Merci.
Merci, gracias. Okay, so item G is just a memorandum of understanding for job sharing. It is just a date change according to the contract. H is our annual property casualty and liability insurance. This was about a 13% increase over last year. One of the things I did was I broke this out. It was actually a little cheaper to use our crime policy through a different vendor. So trying to save as much cost as we could. It probably only saved about $2,000, but breaking it out and not keeping it a part of the Ohio Schools plan was a little bit cheaper. So there are two policies here for the property casualty as an umbrella piece. So that is there for your approval, and then the AP biology trip. Any other questions?
No
None
more
for me.
comments? Okay, roll call.
Mrs. Kramer?
Yes.
Mrs. Kwiatkowski?
Yes.
Mrs. Mack?
Yes.
Mrs. Wigman?
Yes.
Mr. Dosum?
Yes, motion carries 5-0. Item 12A, resolve to approve certified personnel recommendations. Item B, resolve to approve classified personnel recommendations. Item C, approval of resolve to approve superintendent's consent items A through B. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay.
Can you
so let me
pull
just
those up,
these
Craig? Yeah, let's just pull them up and.
So this is the certified list. We had a couple contract revisions that were just for teaching levels after we were able to verify all of their teaching credentials. Some recommendations for our additional staff members next year at the elementary school, first, second, and third grade, a new school psychologist, director of pupil services, OTES 2 credential, also our resignation of pupil services director, Cindy Tomasetti, retirement from one of our elementary teachers, some unpaid leave, and some ESY recommendations.
Which is extended school year.
Extended school year, yes. Let me pull up the classified ones. Lots of classified ones that we have. A lot of beekeepers for their program over the summer, some substitutes, also trying to hire custodian twos. All of this was, I believe, unchanged. We have some resignations in custodian twos and educational assistants, mechanic. So we are posting for a full-time mechanic, food service workers. We had 2 retirements, 1 bus driver, which we're sad to see go because we know those are hard to come by. Maintenance 1, some unpaid leaves, more beekeepers, summer camps, extended school year on the classified side for assistants. Also some summer helpers for our technology kids and custodial staff. And I believe also, oh no, bus cleaning, sorry. I knew there was another one on there. So they're getting the Chromebooks and the computers and stuff ready to go over the summer on the classified side. Any questions on either of those?
Well, do we know there were some bus drivers on there, 1 retired and it looked like a couple others were leaving or unpaid leave. Do we have a sense of, I know it's June, but where we're at with bus drivers because that has been,
We're currently hiring them.
Yes, we're hiring. Okay.
I don't honestly know how many are in the docket, to be quite honest. I think some of them, as they're reaching retirement age, a lot of them are coming back to sub for us, which is great. They just don't want the full-time everyday type of job. So I know some of them, we've asked them if they will, once they're on in the pension system or retirement, then they'll still sub for us as needed. I have to talk to Fonzie to see how many are in the pipeline, but I mean, we're obviously still looking, so.
Are they prevented from subbing though, from retirement for 60 days? Like if,
It's not really the same position. So as long as it's not the same position, I mean, it is, but it's a substitute position. I don't know. You'd agree with that, Mr. Harrison? Yes. Yeah.
so they could, I mean, if they
You just
retire
can't hire
today,
them back you can't hire them back as
as a
a
bus driver.
regular bus driver
Okay.
without the rehire language.
And I just wanted to mention, there was a really nice story on, I think, Channel 3 about a week and a half ago about one of our bus drivers, John Corfidge. So congratulations, Mr. Corfidge, if you're tuning into the meeting.
Absolutely.
So it's a great story.
I want to make sure that I recognize Mrs.
I know.
Tomasetti. I want,
to it.
yeah, I didn't get to know you as well as I would have liked, but I have to say that you came at a very difficult time in this district with that department, and I'm thankful that you calmed the waters, and we're in a lot better place since you've been here, just even how you it's how you handle things, not what we say, right? It's how we say it sometimes. And you did a great job. So I'm sorry to see you go. You were appreciated, and then I'm gonna cry, but you were appreciated because it was something that was just, it was heartbreaking before you came, how our parents felt, and they're happy, as happy as they got here. So,
Yeah, it's true.
and
We win.
it's okay. It's okay. But like, I want you to know that because just the fact that we haven't gotten this barrage of, emails and just thank you. Okay. You were appreciated and you still are, and your legacy will live on.
Yeah, I second what Kathleen says, and best of luck. You will be greatly missed.
And I said everything before the meeting, actually, because I got to run into you in the hallway, but yeah, you so appreciated. Parents found you worked hard, especially with our special education audit, made lots of really good changes. Parents found you responsive, student-centered, and, just like Kathleen and Ellen is saying, thank you so much. I thank you for when I first was elected, you opened your arms to me, let me come in. We had really good discussions, really got a good understanding of special education in Brecksville, Robbie Heights. And welcome to Cassie. I know you're going to fill those shoes and keep rocking it out like Mrs. Tomasetti has already done. And we look forward to everything you're going to do. Yeah.
And I echo that also, thank you for all of your contributions to our district. We had a big hill to climb after that special ed audit and you helped us get up that hill. So much appreciated and really best of luck in your future endeavors. Other comments? or
Yeah, I mean,
questions?
they all pretty much covered it. So wish you the best of luck on the next adventure.
Yeah.
Anything else before we vote? Roll call.
Mrs. Kramer?
We did a
Yes.
motion to approve
Yes.
the consent.
Yes, we did.
So moved.
You moved. You did.
We-
I know that was a long discussion.
Okay, we gotta start staying a little more focused.
Mrs. Whitehouse.
Sorry.
Session kind of through, it was so engaging. It's unbelievable.
I'm so sorry, everyone.
Mrs. Kwiatkowski.
I have to abstain.
Mrs. Mack.
Yes.
Thank you.
Mrs. Wigman.
You didn't forget what you were voting on.
Yes.
Mr. Dosen.
Yes.
And I have a question, just because this is something, should, if somebody's relatives in there, regardless, should they be pulled out? Because even if it's unpaid,
I had a relative on that. That's why I
Oh.
had to abstain.
Yes, we talked about that though with the pre-agenda. You were going to abstain, right? I thought.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
should they?
But going forward,
We should.
we should always look,
Okay.
we could talk to Jeff on that to have more eyes on that, maybe have a process in place to make sure that no board relative is, and if there is, that they're pulled out separately. So,
Okay.
okay. You got everybody, right?
Yes.
All right, motion carries 4-0.
All right.
All right, item E, resolve to approve supplemental personnel recommendations. May I have a motion?
Dare I motion? Yes.
Second.
You were the first, Ms.
That
Wigman.
is really wow.
Dare I motion?
Let me bring this up as well. So there's not too many on here, but that is our current supplemental list. So we've got cross country, football, tennis, volleyball.
Any comments or questions?
No.
Roll call.
Mrs. Kramer,
Yes.
Ms. Kwiatkowski,
Yes.
Mrs. Mack, Mrs. Wigman.
Yes.
Mr. Dosen.
Yes, motion carries 5-0. Item 13, treasurer's consent agenda. Item A, resolve to approve the financial reports as attached. Item B, resolve to approve the 2023-2024 pay to participate fees as attached. Item C, resolve to approve the transfer of funds as attached. Item D, resolve to approve the final FY23 budget modifications, appropriations, and estimated resources as attached. Item E, resolve to approve the FY24 appropriations and estimated resources as attached. Item F, resolve to accept the lowest bid per the bid tab results tabulation as attached. Item G, resolve to accept donations as presented. Item H, resolve to dispose of the auctioned assets as submitted below. Item I, resolve to approve the minutes from the May 24th regular board meeting and the special board meeting held on May 17th and May 22nd, all of 2023 as attached. Item J, resolve to approve treasurer's consent items A through I. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All right, Greg, you want to walk us through
Okay.
them?
I also have a big agenda, so sorry, Dave. It'll be my goal to make it a little longer. Just kidding. These are the May financials. So we're always a month behind. So let me kind of zoom in here. For May in this last purple column. So we took in about $2.8 million. Most of that was in our state funding, $364,000. And then we also got our homestead rollback money, which was about $2 million. So those are our two big ticket items that we received in May. And then our expenditures were $4.2 million. So we did a deficit monthly spend of $1.4 million, which is typical, I guess. The way our property taxes come in. So we compare our revenues from fiscal 22 to fiscal 23 in the month of May. So May to May, we see a large increase this year. That is basically due to the fact that the homestead rollback last year came in April versus May. So it's mostly just a timing thing. And then we also received a little bit more money in state aid this year versus last year, which is mostly the result of fair school funding. When we look at the fiscal year to date from May, or I'm sorry, on this expenditure side, we have $4.2 million versus $4 million. And that was that purchase services are up overall from last year as we did take on an SRO, technology services. So some of that is starting to catch up a little bit, but we've also reduced in personnel services. Salaries and benefits were a little bit higher than last year, but it was very nominal. And again, that's mostly due to some of the salary increases that were built in. That's the overall picture basically. So at the end of that, I'm not going to give you a sneak peek yet, but that's not the number. Our number, as according to the projections here, would be $24 million would be the carryover, which would be an increase of $1.3 million to the overall cash balance. So unfavorable a little bit, but pretty spot on with the revenues. And then on the expenditures, we're doing well on the expenditure side. And then lastly, when we compare fiscal year to fiscal year to date revenues in green for 22 and blue for 23, blue for 23. We obviously do have more revenue for at the same time this year versus last year, but yet our expenses are also a little bit more than they were last year to look at the global picture of everything. So overall, it still has done well as we've closed out the fiscal year. So more news to come as we look at that for our closing, which will actually be on Monday to move into fiscal 24. The pay to participate fees have been calculated. Just a couple of, assuming all of these have kind of been reviewed, so I'll kind of do some highlights of these as I bring them up. This has been the task of our new operations coordinator. So I've been working with Leonard on this, and he's done a great job with looking at how we can condense things and average things together as we kind of use this raw data to calculate things. So we kind of still kept the transparency piece, but we did look at averaging our total costs. So we looked at average enrollment, average total cost. The average total cost is the cost of transportation and supplementals. Then we take that 50%, and then you see our true calculation of pay to participate in the 5th column, I think. And then we did a quick comparison of what the fee is this year and what the fee will be next year. And then we capped to the same thing. We kind of explained last year that we're going to have some trending because some of this was kind of unmanaged for a little while. So we're going to see some ebbs and flows. We capped everything at a 25% increase or a 25% decrease. So the first one's a good example. Academic Challenge is going to be moving from $175 pay to participate to $145. And it will actually make it to its actual true pay to participate calculation. It's within the 25% threshold. So all of those numbers are there to tell you what the new pay to participates are for next year. We're going to look next year to see if we'll do a 3-year average or if that becomes kind of obsolete, because the one thing we're trying to struggle with is that obviously with the contract changing, that supplementals are going to continue to increase. So the longer we average, we're almost dragging the average down when we're looking at true pay to participate calculations. Not as much for transportation. So I think transportation might. So we're going to kind of keep using this raw data that we're getting. We did see an uptick this year. We had some meetings with the advisors at the high school, especially because they're kind of being held accountable through their 200 funds, and they did a pretty good job overall. So by doing a good job, what I mean by that is that they're also training those rosters to the office to make sure that the people that are in those clubs are the ones that are being assessed the fee. So last year, the year before was like the first year we were doing some of that. And so we didn't necessarily get people that really understood that and really kind of enforced that. Whereas now the high school and the staff, the office staff has assisted with it as well. But the advisors have done a good job of making sure that they're accounting for the kids that are actually signed up. And the ones that sign up and then just drop out, they're not being charged either. So again, trying to use that raw data out of the system to make all of these calculations work. So that was the clubs. This is the calculations for the athletics. Maybe if it loads, there we go. So we can see the athletics. The one thing, a couple changes that we did on athletics that you'll notice is that one, we talked about parity as we brought on Mr. Harrison, and we're made a conscious effort outside of just using the raw data to also condense in this final version, making sure that any girls varsity sports and boys varsity sports are paying the same amount of money. So that's one of the biggest caveats that we made as it came to athletics. So you no longer see, you see baseball and softball because they're different names, but you now see varsity basketball. So that is the basketball fee for girls and boys. In many cases, those were the same. Again, it was a mathematical calculation. 25% was still the threshold. And then you can see the true pay to participate calculations in this column, and then what the current one was for this past year, and then what the new fee is for next year. So one of the things that we kind of talked about is we are going to eventually have to have that conversation of what's going to happen in this district with pay to participate, because we are starting to see more and more sports that are heading towards the cap, and we have some ideas, and we can have a conversation down the road, but it's just something that we're looking at because we could get to the point where almost every sport is on the cap, and then what's the purpose of the cap? So we'll kind of continue to kind of have that conversation, but
Can you elaborate just for anybody who's tuning in out?
Sure. I mean, the cap we have for high school students is $500 per student, and that includes sports and academic pieces of pay to participate. And then middle school is $300. That would include athletics and any clubs. So the district has set along several years ago, 2017, I think, is when they moved to the cap of $500 and $300. So with that time, though, things have obviously escalated. Salaries have gone up, cost of transportation, gas, all of that stuff has all increased. So it's only going to keep pushing pay to participate unless you just get more kids moving up towards the cap. So the district then starts to write off more of that. So what happens is if you have a student athlete who's in gymnastics and basketball, which I guess you couldn't be in the same, or could you? No, they're both winter sports. That example. But if you have two kids that are in, or even if they're in tennis and gymnastics, the tennis team, basically that whole $400 gets written off, and the district then covers the full cost of that because you've already met the cap threshold. They can also participate in multiple club activities, and then they all become free at that point. So that's just where we are. And then the district does continue to take on that burden, financially speaking.
So, and just to add a little more color to that, the backstory on it was, going back a few years, but 2009, 10, and 11, we had operating levy that failed 3 straight times. We were coming out of the Great Recession. District had to make a lot of painful cuts, including staff reductions. And the two of the more painful cuts were the elimination of high school busing and 100% pay to participate. And as you mentioned, the pay to participate was coaches or advisors' salaries and transportation. And so as we repaired our financial health, we wanted to bring back both high school busing and pay to participate, but the board back then wanted to do it in a way that we wanted it to be sustained so that we didn't run into another financial crisis and then go back to 100% pay to play and eliminate high school busing. So in both cases, the board looked at, from a high school busing standpoint, we consolidated stops to make it more efficient so that students had to walk a little farther, but we felt that was more sustainable financially for the long term. And for pay to participate, we had many conversations about what makes sense. And where we landed was 50%, but we put in the caps. And so, and as you mentioned, the caps haven't been revisited in a number of years since we put that into play. And so now you're getting a lot of students that are hitting the caps. And so, this is a topic that, when Jeff comes on board, it's a good topic for discussion about what do we want to do with this? Do we want to increase the caps? Do we want to tie them to some metric? What do we want to do with it? And so And again, even here, and so people understand too, some of this blending of, let's say, like basketball, right, where there's both girls and boys basketball. You know, technically, if you just went by the coach's salary, if you had a coach who was coaching the girls varsity basketball team and had been coaching for 20 years, their pay would be higher than if you had a brand new boys basketball coach. So if you just stayed at that level, you would have disparities across girls and boys sports. So this is a blending of it to try to say, let's take them both and average it out, because we don't want to have disparity between the same sport, girls paying a different fee than the boys. And so this again is a topic that maybe when we tee it up later for next year, we figure out, you know, if we want to keep the same model, if we want to tweak it, if we want to change it, what do we want to do with this as a topic? But for now, we're staying the course that we're on.
Yeah. And so the last one is, this is the middle school, which it actually combines because there's less of them. It's the clubs as well as the sports. I think it also, like, we're trying to be transparent with some of the numbers. And so you can see what is popular too, as we look at enrollment. Now, some of them, it's not necessarily fair because academic challenge, for instance, is meant to be small. But these are some conversations that we've had, like Model UN at the middle school is relatively small. Pay to participate calculation is 204, but it's capped at 101. So the question becomes is, if it becomes to 204, because it would theoretically increase to 25% every year until it reaches there, will kids continue to do it for that kind of price? And that's what we'll have to figure out. So I've had some conversations with Mr. Rings at the middle school. Honeycomb is another one, $153. It's currently just maximizing at the $25 because that's what the cost would be. So that has become part of the conversation, whether they can get more kids involved or whatnot, or whether that's something we just continue, or if it's not popular, maybe something that they have to part with down the road. So we'll continue those conversations, because some of those we don't know if they'll pay $150 to be a part of the newspaper, for instance. If that makes sense. Okay. So those are here.
Before you move on,
Oh, go ahead.
can you go back to the athletics?
High school.
Yes.
Okay.
And we just spent some time talking about how we have put boys and girls together so that you're only seeing one, but there is one caveat, there is one exception, and that is boys volleyball and girls volleyball. So can we explain that for any of
Yes.
our viewers who might be wondering, why are girls volleyball players
Yes.
playing 500? But
Good catch, because we did talk about that. So that is one of the caveats that we had to deal with. So if you recall, boys volleyball, has always been a club sport. So we will have to address this, but their supplementals are inherently right now substantially almost half the cost because it was a club sport as it compares to girls volleyball. And so it wasn't fair either way. The district loses majorly if you bring the girls down that far, plus you go beyond the 25%. It was the only one we could not make work, but it also is kind of an outlier because it was a club sport and now it's moving to an OHSAA sponsored sport. So we're going to kind of see how that plays out, I guess. So that is why it's lower. The cost did go up. And so you can see that it went up from this year to next year. And last year, if you remember too, we did increase that substantially more because it was moving to a varsity sport. And so now it does have transportation costs, which before I don't believe it did. So the cost increase, we kind of took a stab at the, in the dark of trying to figure out where it should be. And we kind of landed, I think, relatively close because now we have that data to be at, was that 265 or 2? Or boys volleyball, sorry, is 170. I was off a line from that far away. 170 to 213. So we calculated it, I think, fairly well for taking a stab in the dark, but now it's going to kind of keep moving up to 25%. But that is the one situation where girls is more than boys until we kind of figure out a better solution to that. And some of that may come up in contract negotiations. If that equalizes, it will equalize automatically, I guess, through that. We can make a one-time adjustment, I think.
I have a question about supplementals. So well, there was a year when, just because I coached Power the Pen in another district, and I saw that we only had one student, and that was years ago. And I know what that supplemental is here.
Mm-hmm.
So we can't, if we have a supplemental that's, board approved, and they have one student, we can't stop a staff member from applying for that. Is that correct? Unless what happens?
So you can't necessarily, because when we post those out, we post them to all staff so they can apply. The district has the obligation, or we decide what gets filled. So if you would have one person, one kid,
Right.
the district can say, we're not offering that class, that supplemental, and that would be how we would eliminate it. So they can apply for it. We don't have to hire for it. So the district can control costs on supplementals in that regard. So if you have something that's specific that isn't, doing well in terms of enrollment and financials or whatever, we can choose as a district to not support that and actually just say that supplemental doesn't exist. So that would be a recommendation from that person right over there. Mr. Harrison gets to pick those things out, along with athletics, of course. But
Like, because, that happened and like, who monitors that?
so I guess that's a good question for, he's like, nah, I'm not answering that question.
Monitor it after the fact, this is what you're doing, right? So, but who's monitoring and saying, hey, wait a minute, you only have one student that's in that, and we're paying you. So who's monitoring? Like, is it the
It's
principal?
typically the recommendation, but I'll let him speak to his
Building
experiences.
admin, just to cut straight to the chase. As a former building principal, you're going to be looking at your supplementals. They're posted, and just remember, just because they're posted doesn't mean they have to be filled. So we would post them all. Staff members would show an interest, but as a building principal, I wouldn't send the recommendation over for the supplemental approval until I knew that the group is going to be off the ground with a sufficient enough number to make it worth the while. Now, I could also argue that it would be worth its while for one student if it was what that student really cares about, but that's at the building level. We post, they would send us a recommendation, and then we would bring it to you for approval. That would come to approval when we know that it's a go. And we would, like, for example, when we schedule classes, we say you have to have a class of 10 or more. We have less than 10, we're not offering the class. It's kind of the same situation here, but to answer your question directly, it's the building level administrator.
I mean, like, I'm approved now,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know who's gonna show up in November.
Yeah.
So what happens with that? Like, that's might have been what happened.
Mhm.
That person was approved, and then they only have one person. So I don't know, like, there've been times when we didn't have enough kids go out for basketball,
Mm-hmm.
and so we had to merge teams together, and
Right.
so that's a little bit easier
Mhm.
than when we have somebody approved. You don't unapprove them then if they're approved now.
That staff member could also choose to resign and not be paid for the position. And hopefully those would be conversations you'd have going in ahead of time. Or at least, okay, it got by this year with 3 or 4 participants, but next year we're going to hold off on approving supplemental until we have the students who have signed up or who have decided to join.
I guess I would say to you,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure, I'm not sure it's been monitored at the level, and especially since financially, we're starting to see that it's becoming a situation, like we're with the cap, okay? And then you have these, the cost supplementals increasing. So can we have somebody monitor who's
So-
actually in that before?
So they do sign up usually through final forms at the beginning of the school year. So, but I would agree with what Mr. Harrison said. That's kind of why, like for the middle school, for instance, that's why Mr. Rings and I had a conversation, obviously, because Jeff hasn't really been onboarded yet because that would be normally his conversation. But, 5 kids or 7 kids in this club for like Honeycomb, for instance, financially doesn't make sense. They ran in the negative there's just not enough to actually even come close to paying for 50%. It just won't work mathematically. So it's typically you'd want to see the building administrator kind of has a conversation with that advisor to give them that chance to say like, hey, we really need to get the enrollment up. Otherwise we may have to next year not do this and we may wait to fill it the following year. So we kind of give them some grace and we hope that that's not the case, but it's kind of having those conversations. So I looked at all of these things. And so we're struggling with hockey, for instance. Hockey is a very expensive sport. It has very low attendance. I don't know if that program is going to run next year. So those are some things that have to happen at the building level and the athletics level for those recommendations to come through. But there are certain things that the enrollment just doesn't support it. And the question is whether or not we're going to then take that burden on financially as a district from the board level, I guess.
It's like, just when I saw that was the power of having here.
Mhm.
Like, I went out and recruited. I called parents, and the kids know I will call, and I got kids in because I know that the team should have 6 kids. I got 5, but I like actively tried, so I'm not sure that's been happening as much here, that, that conversation happens, and, we need you to go find someone, like you said, but I just have seen some things go under the radar, just because I'm out and about in the educational world, and I'm not sure that's okay once I'm starting to see how much you're actually getting. for
Right.
one kid.
The other side of
Correct.
that coin is we're going to hear very quickly from many of the advisors, because when I've met with the staffs already, low participation is due to pay to participate. So this conversation we're having is good, and it should be, but as soon as we start having that conversation at a deeper level, we're gonna also be faced with the idea of, well, the reason you only have one kid is because it is X amount of dollars. So, and that's a barrier to entry for some students. A way deeper conversation than I think we need to have tonight, but it's just the other side of that argument.
Yeah, just stay over there. All right, transfer request is here for athletics. At the end of the school year, athletic budget is in the negative by $25,000. We have to supplement that for compliance purposes. So we are transferring $25,000 from the general fund to the athletic fund to fix that negative balance. For your approval is just our annual, this is, as Mr. Harrison calls this is my meeting, because we have to approve these things for compliance reasons of the estimated resources, the budget appropriations, budget modifications, all of that is here to bring everything in alignment for our end of our fiscal year. And then here, the next item is to get us started for our appropriations for July 1, as well as our estimated resources for fiscal 24, which starts on Monday.
I'm sorry, just a quick question on the transfer request then. So, and I'm trying to recall, does the athletic budget, are they usually in the red by this much? Or is this a new?
Well, it's actually been worse. I have been offsetting the athletic budget through the use of ESSER dollars for the past 2 years. So technically it's better. So I've talked with Mr. Maslona. That's why he's bringing back some of the fundraising. He did the car raffle again this year, which brought in a good chunk of money. So about a month ago, that fund was negative almost $50,000. So between that and the wrestling tournament that brings in money for athletics. So he's continuing to work on some different ideas to balance it. I think his revenue stream is relatively consistent. And so the goal for him is you've got to figure out how to try to live within your means in terms of if you're going to bring in $180,000 or $200,000, because that's what your steady income is. You either need to figure out, again, the same conversation we have, which is how do you raise more money, or how are you going to budget that 200,000 with all your different sports that you manage? And I mean, he's struggling too with rising costs. We're still charging the same amount at the gates. So that's conversations I know they're having at the suburban league, I believe. The cost of officials has continued to rise, things like that. So I mean, it's a struggle, and I think he's trying. And so technically, I would say it's better this year than it has been the last 2 years, but it's still in the negative. So we'd like to just see it as close to zero as possible, maybe $1 plus. So appropriations for fiscal 23-24. Here's the roof bid. So I guess we'll take a quick look at this. Which one is this? I forget. Was this the tabulation one? So you can see the actual bids that came in. We bid item 1 basically, so you can ignore item 2. So those are the companies that bid: 443, 499, 393, 532, and 347. And then there were more down here, which were 485, 540, 457, and 411. So we had the 9 bids that were all there. So you can see it kind of was really like almost all over the place, but still good for us. So donations we have here. We've also included a link because Mrs. Voigt has done some phone calls to graduating seniors, because some people don't want to go through the process of getting a refund, which my office greatly appreciates as well. So a lot of the seniors have actually, if they have $10, $20 balances, they've chosen to just donate those to kids in need. So our negative fund balance, not negative fund balance, our negative accounts in food service is down from, I think, $23,000 in students that have overcharged down to $17,000. So I don't know if all of them are from there, but those have all been approved on this link because there's so many of them. But graduating seniors are donating some of their leftover lunch funds to those in need, or those who haven't paid.
So I actually forgot to send that over to you. I can't open this link.
Oh, okay.
So we just want to make sure, one, I absolutely
I'll have to
adore
I'll have to give her
the seniors have done this.
Oh, did you?
Okay.
I'll have her
Okay.
open it up to everybody so that it is on there, I guess.
But I love that this is sort of a gesture from the seniors. I think it's just great.
Yeah. And she talked to a parent today who, I don't know if they actually came up today, but they asked what the total balance was that was due from negative funds. And she said, well, can I give that information? And I said, you can. Because in my prior district, that was said, and someone brought a check for $2,000 to the school the next day. Not saying that person has to do that, but they were kind of asking, I think, to know what the gravity was, to know, I think they're going to come up to the school and actually make some sort of donation to help out some of those lunch funds. So those conversations are happening, and we have some very generous people. Disposal of assets. We did just sell 5 buses last week. So those buses are here. Those are some of our older buses, but we did sell them to one bidder bought all of them for about, it was about $20,000 for all 5 buses that we have taken out of the fleet. And that is that the last one? Oh, the minutes, sorry. And then the minutes, which we've now included links, specific links to the meetings just for quicker reference and kind of like meeting minute compliance, I guess. So the regular minutes are here as they're typed up. And then we have the actual YouTube links for each of those meetings now listed in the content as well. So people can watch the YouTubes if they have questions. Any questions?
Thank you.
Comments?
I have a question. I do have a question, and it's kind of, so you can shut me down because it's.
I'm trying to go longer than Dr. Martin, so keep asking.
Okay, no, so we sold those buses, but we were trying to get some. Did we ever get our buses? We were like two years out from getting
So
them.
we did purchase 1.5 buses, I guess. So like, I don't know, because one isn't a full-size bus. We bought a special ed bus and a regular bus. I believe we've received both of those now.
Okay.
So we did get
We should
those.
have got them. Like,
I think either in the fall, well, so we're looking at getting, correct me if I'm wrong, Brian, we're looking at, it's the bid now, right? That we're looking at getting the wheelchair van.
okay.
So the plan is to get a wheelchair van. Those still have pretty long lead times. We're gonna get a wheelchair lift van. And then next year we'll probably buy 2 buses, but we may also still unload 5 more buses some of our older buses, once we get rolling.
I just want to make sure that we got those.
We did.
We were waiting for a long time.
We did. That is the lead. And part of it's almost like good that we were where we are, I guess, in the number of, we had so many buses versus what we needed, because it's starting to come down, because I was just at the meeting with the OSC, and it was like 18 months to 24 months is how far out they were for purchasing. Now they're looking at mostly between 12, 13 months to like 15 months. So it's starting to come back in terms of the supply chain. So it's kind of good that we don't need them, because there's some schools out there that like need them. So we've kind of given our spots to them, but we'll still have to get in line for the next round of bus purchases.
Well, I have a question. That van, we bought a van, right?
Not yet, but we're going to.
Do our coaches use that van? 'Cause
The
I know
wheelchair
some-
van?
Oh, no.
We-
We're buying a wheelchair.
We're
Okay.
buying a wheelchair lift van.
Because I had heard some of our coaches have to get like license, like van license. So that's another.
I don't think we charge them for that though. I don't even think the volunteers, I can double check, because we have our own OBI who does it in-house.
But
So-
they're not using our van because it's a wheelchair van. So that's-
Not that one, but we have other vans that coaches use.
Oh, we do.
Yeah, we have 8 or 9 vans.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, so some of the smaller golf, I think tennis sometimes uses the vans. So yeah, we definitely use those. Coaches use those. Robotics even uses them sometimes as well. So yeah, and they do have to take the van certification course, but I think I'll double check with Brian, but I believe we pay for all of it for that, because our instructor trainer does it in-house at the transportation garage. It's like a 2-hour course. Anything else?
Other comments or questions?
I think you beat them.
You think so? I'm gonna go back and watch the YouTube.
I'll help out. Roll call.
Oh, Mrs. Kramer,
Yes.
Mrs. Kwiatkowski.
Yes.
Mrs. Mack,
Yeah.
Mrs. Wigman,
Yes.
Mr. Dosen.
Yes, motion carries 5-0. Item 14, announcements. The next regular board meeting of the Board of Education is scheduled for June 19th at 7 p.m. But as I mentioned, we'll probably do a special board meeting next week on the 5th. So we'll send it.
July
You said
19th.
June,
July.
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 It's a late night.
Mark,
Did I say June 19th?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, it's July 19th.
Like we've already passed that.
Get your time machine.
Yep.
But we'll likely meet July 5th with a special board meeting, but we'll send out a public announcement So pay attention to that. Item B.
Can I just add one offer of congratulations to the Alumni Association that hosted their pancake breakfast over the
Sure.
weekend at the Breakfast Hall Home Days. It was just another great event, really well attended. It's a great time for the community. So it was really well attended. It was great.
Great. Yeah. Thanks. All right. Item B, resolve to adjourn the meeting. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second,
Roll call.
Mrs. Kramer,
yes.
Mrs. Bykowski,
Yes.
Mrs. Mack,
Yeah.
Mrs. Wigman,
Yes.
Mr. Dosen.
Yes, meeting is adjourned. Have a good evening, everyone.